this is one of my favorite things about photography, is that the way that I use it is mainly just for capturing memories of my family, right? That's the majority of my images. It's photos while we're out together, photos of us doing things, taken with intention in more of an artistic way, a focus on lighting, on composition. But again, that's the tool. But as the art form, photography has this amazing ability to help us process life in various ways. Hey, welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast, brought to you by CloudSpot, the all-in-one solution for photographers like yourself to deliver and even sell your photos online. I'm your host, Raymond Hadfield, and today we have something a little bit different, a little bit more topical, I guess, to my life, with lessons that I learned that I really want to share with you, because I really feel like in the past few weeks, few months, my view on imagery, my view on images and what is art has been evolving more than kind of ever before. And I want to kind of share some of those ideas with you to help encourage you to see the world around you through more of an artistic lens. And all of this kind of started actually because last weekend, our family took a kind of an impromptu trip to New York, kind of as a bit of a parent guilt for not doing as many things over the summer with our kids as we had wanted to. And my son is very much into not only geography, but also history and aviation as well. So New York seemed to be a really good place to allow us to kind of experience all of those things and go to just a new location, somewhere where the kids have never been before. And I know growing up, those were always kind of my favorite trips, just to be able to explore. And we don't really do a lot of like touristy things. We just kind of mostly go off on our own. But this was definitely more of a touristy trip, and it was a great time. But like I said, this trip to New York really, I feel, expanded my view on what is art more than almost anything that I've experienced before in my life. And I've been to New York before several times. Never really with a lot of time to visit and like really see things. It was more of, I guess you could say, like a work trip. But this time was a little bit different, having a little bit more breathing room in our schedule. I really feel like opened up my eyes to what New York really was. And it was truly amazing. So I'm going to be referencing this trip quite a bit here in this episode. And if you've ever been to New York, or I guess if you've been to any big city, you know that like these big cities can be dirty, they can be busy, they can be crowded. You can feel alone, yet be surrounded by so many people all at once. And it's pretty hard to organize all that into one spot. So Charlie told me this fact that my son, that blew my mind. It blew my mind because we have Indianapolis is a large city. It's bigger than Kansas City. It's bigger than St. Louis. It has a bigger population than all of those. And Cincinnati, it's a big city. Growing up, I lived very close to San Francisco. I went there often. I went to film school in Los Angeles. I've been to big cities before, but going to New York always surprises me at just how densely populated it is. So what Charlie told me was that the population of Indiana is 6.8 million people, the entire state, 6.8 million people. And the population of just New York City was more than 8 million people. So there's more people in one location, essentially the size of, smaller than the footprint of Indianapolis, and yet more people than the entire state of Indiana. And what's difficult, I think, in being in these places with so many people, like I said, having lived in Los Angeles, I definitely felt this way before, that sometimes you can feel like you are a number. There's so many people that it's hard to feel real connection to the entire thing. You really have to make a smaller group of people that are your community. And that's tough because you're just surrounded by so many people all the time. And I think that's what makes you feel as if you're a bit of a number, is that you don't stand out as much on your own. I don't really know how to describe it more than that, but I think that if maybe you've lived in a big city, you kind of understand that feeling. Whereas living here in small town Indiana, everywhere I go, I feel like I see somebody that I know, or I feel familiar with these people if I don't know them firsthand. So being in this location with so many people, and yet you still feel like you're not connected to all these people at the same time, can feel like a bit of a drag. right? But what's great about humanity is our constant need to express ourselves, and doing so in a way that allows us to express ourselves to the benefit of others, meaning creating works of art so that others can enjoy. And I feel like New York was so full of these little vignettes of art in places that, for all intents and purposes, needs to be extremely utilitarian just to operate. These little tiny intentional pieces of art were they just felt like a breath of fresh air every single time. And it wasn't like, here's one there and here's one like way over here. They were everywhere. And maybe it's just that I noticed them so much this time that it really stood out to me, but it really made me think about kind of what is art? What is art? Is it just something that you enjoy looking at? Is it any painting? Is it any sculpture? Is it any photograph? Are all of these things art? And if so, what makes one more valuable than another? Maybe not financially more valuable, or in a monetary sense rather, but personally, what makes them more valuable? I've shared this story here on the podcast before. My father passed away when I was just a few months old, so I never really got to meet him. But we have just a handful of photos of him and I when I was a baby. And I love those photos. I appreciate them because of what they are and just how few they are, how few images there are of us together. And my mom recently sent me it's like a shadow box type thing that my dad was in the Coast Guard, had a number of achievements, and she made like a shadow box with all of these in there, as well as a selfie that he took with a Polaroid camera. Now, to me, that's simply just kind of a documentation, right? He just took a photo of himself. Maybe it was the first image in that cartridge of Polaroids, or maybe it was the last and he needed to switch it out before he went on a trip and didn't want to have to replace the cartridge after just taking one photo. I don't know. But that photo feels like so much more to me than just, hey, let me just waste this photo so that I can add in another cartridge. And what I love is that photo means a lot to me, but it probably doesn't mean a lot to you. You don't know this person. You don't know what this is about. You don't know why this is important. But to me, it is important. And so, like I said, I mean, just going around New York and seeing all these small details made me wonder, like, what is art? What is art? Is it that Polaroid? Is it that selfie? It wasn't intended to be art. But what my mom did was that she took that photo and incorporated it in more personal elements to create a piece of art. So it's not just the tool itself. It's not just the camera. It's not just the glass or the wood in this photo frame, but it's kind of all of it. It's the intention of the whole thing. And it's something that is created, I think, in my definition. Art is something that has been created to help you feel something, to encourage you to feel something. So when we look at art kind of through that lens of being encouraged to feel something, suddenly the entire world opens up to be seen as pieces of art. Now, it's not everything, but on top of that example that I just gave of this shadow box that my mom had made, as we were driving out to New York, we drove because we are from the Midwest, and that's just what you do. And a 12-hour drive is an easy day. Just something that is a rite of passage as a transplant new Midwesterner, I suppose. So that's what we did, unfortunately, and it was the worst. But as we were driving out there, driving through Pennsylvania, there's a number of mountains. And rather than driving around these mountains, they just blasted tunnels through these mountains. And if you've ever been through a tunnel before during the day, you know that as you're outside and it's daytime, there's lots of light. It's very bright, but it's fine. Your eyes have adjusted. But when you go into a dark tunnel, it takes a while for your eyes to adjust. And that can be a scary moment, right? At first, maybe it's just 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds, I don't know. But you go through and your eyes need that time to adjust just from the difference of essentially exposure. The amount of light that was outside compared to the amount of light inside the tunnel is drastically different. And again, your eyes need to adjust. So as we're driving out there, I realized as we're going through one of these tunnels, wow, it is much darker halfway through this tunnel than it was at the beginning. That is crazy. I wonder if it's some sort of electrical thing, or they need to change out these bulbs, or I don't know, the voltage is all way. I don't know. I had no idea. But as we got towards the end of the tunnel, the lights were bright. They got brighter again. And at first I just thought, well, I guess these bulbs are fixed. This is a good bank of lights. We got out of the tunnel, not thinking anything of it. Mile or two down the road, there's another tunnel coming up, and we go through, and then once again, halfway through the tunnel, I realize, wait a second, these lights are darker here in the middle as well. But I could see up ahead, towards the end of the tunnel, the lights once again got brighter. And I thought, why are the lights brighter at the beginning of the tunnel and the end of the tunnel, but in the middle, they're not as bright? And then it hit me, like, as you go through these tunnels, because your eyes need to adjust, if you're traveling 60, 70 miles an hour, you can cover a lot of space in the time that it takes your eyes to adjust, even if it's just 2 seconds. And that can be dangerous. That can cause some sort of accident. And if you're in a tunnel, I mean, you're screwed. The whole thing needs to be shut down to clear out the accident, fix it, whatever. Somebody had the frame of mind to come in and say to themselves, you know what? The beginning of this tunnel needs to be brighter. And the end of the tunnel needs to be brighter. Because if we can increase the amount of light in these areas, then the time for somebody's eyes to adjust drops dramatically. But we don't need the whole thing to be this bright because, well, that just takes a ton of energy. And by the time you get to the middle, your eyes have adjusted anyway. There's no need to waste that additional energy. And when you look at it, again, through the lens of something that was designed to elicit some sort of feeling or emotion, maybe that wouldn't fit that exact definition, but it was done intentionally with emotion and with intention built into it, with love, right? That person, whoever designed that element of the tunnel to be brighter in the beginning and the end, didn't do so for cost savings. They didn't do so simply for being more utilitarian. They did it with a purpose so that hopefully you didn't cause an accident. You didn't get into an accident. When you get into an accident, not only are you affecting your life, the life of everybody else behind you in traffic, but also the life of, so many others that are in your web of people who you know. And that, to me, is a form of art. It wasn't necessarily done just to make something pretty or beautiful, but it was done with intention. And it was done with the goal in mind of thinking about you, of getting you to feel loved when you think about that. And that's a very utilitarian way of how work can be looked at as art, how the world can be looked at as art. So maybe that's not the best example of how the whole world can be looked at as art, but it's just to kind of get you in that mindset of, wow, it doesn't have to be a painting. It doesn't have to be a sculpture. It doesn't have to be a photo for something to be art, but it can be everything in this world around us. So as I said, we're going to New York. We went to New York, and there was something about just everything that we had seen that was truly fascinating to me. And what we did was we actually had a tour to go to visit the World Trade Site, as well as go down to the museum. So, we did all the, like I said, very touristy things, visit the Statue of Liberty and go to the top of the Empire State Building. But to me, going to this 9/11 Memorial Museum was the eye-opener. And just to preface, I was not personally affected by 9/11. I don't know anybody who died or was affected by the events of 9/11. I have no direct connection to it. But going to it was so profound, and it was so moving to me. And a lot of the people there, everywhere you looked, there were people who were trying to compose themselves because it's a very emotional place. And as you go to this museum, if you haven't been there before, the museum is essentially in the basement of the towers, of both towers. It's at the bedrock of the Twin Towers. So you have to descend 70 feet to get to this museum. And while you're down there, you see artifacts, you see personal items that were left behind. You see, there's obviously lots of education, but there's a fire truck that was at the base of the buildings when they had collapsed, and it was just crushed. And it's there on display for you to look at. The spire that was more than 1,700 feet in the air is right there for you to look at. It's now 70 feet below ground level. And you can see the damage. You can see how destroyed these things are, how much these items, like this is the physical manifestation of what happened that day. And that is so powerful to see, because as somebody who, I think I was in 8th grade at the time during 9/11, and I had only seen it on TV. I've seen several documentaries, I've seen stuff like that, but it's all on TV. It's not in real life. And to see these things in person, was just extremely powerful. So this whole museum is full of, again, these artifacts and these pieces that were there the day of or had some sort of connection to 9/11. I mean, the actual piece of the building, the steel facade that was the point of impact from the first plane that came and hit the first tower, was right there for you to look at, for you to see. Very moving. So this place is full of pieces like this. And as you're walking, you kind of round this turn, and about 40, 50 feet tall, more than 100 feet wide, is this large piece of art. It's a large installation, and it's this beautiful blue wall. And this piece is called Trying to Remember the Color of the Sky on That September Morning. And it was by the artist Spencer Finch. It was, in fact, the only piece that was commissioned by the 9/11 Memorial Committee for this museum. And what it is it's 2,983 individual squares, watercolor painted blue, a different shade of blue, every single one of them, 2,983 different shades of blue. And in the middle of this piece, of this mosaic, is the quote, "No day shall erase you from the memory of time." And as you kind of read into it, each of those letters in that quote were forged from metal that was recovered from ground zero. And this piece, it made me wonder. It was like, as you look around and you see one of the elevator shafts just completely destroyed. When you see a note that said 12 stuck, 109th floor, please send help, that somebody had to throw out of a window in hopes of getting help, that somebody would come up and help them. When you see these pieces, these tangible pieces of the event everywhere, and yet it's a rather small space, and so much of that space was taken up by this one piece of art. It's the only piece of art in the entire museum. And I thought about why. Why did they do this? Why is this here? It is beautiful, and it is extremely touching. And if you have the chance to see it or read about it, it's truly amazing. But why was this here? This one piece of art stands out among all of the artifacts. So again, why? Why is this here? And as we're going through the museum, I'm thinking about it, and you realize how much art can help you to process feelings. You realize how much art can help you understand grief. You realize how much art can enhance your life, your outlook on the world, how it can bring hope, how it can help you feel resilient. And it's not just to be something pretty. And in fact, as I was reading about this piece, Spencer Finch's piece here, there was a lot of controversy about it. Now, just looking at it, there's nothing controversial about it. The controversy was whether or not we should put it in the museum and if it felt a little deaf to the situation. And what they had decided was that this piece was made for several reasons. One, according to the artist, this piece encapsulates the collective grief and remembrance. It symbolizes the idea of memory and how everybody kind of remembers the beauty of that morning. In fact, for the several days leading up to the attacks, it was terrible weather. And the night before, there was a Yankees-Red Sox game that got rained out. That's how bad it was. And yet you wake up on this morning, September 11th, and it just felt like a fresh start, and everybody took notice. So it's playing on that perception of memory. He says, many remember the beauty of the clear sky on that morning of September 11th, but our perception of the color of blue might not be the same of any other person. However, just like our perception of color, our memories share a common point of reference. So even though something is experienced, even though there's one singular event, you can write down the facts. Here's what happened, step by step by step. But the perception of those events were different for every single person. Thousands of people, millions of people across the world. And this piece commemorates that. It allows us to remember, obviously, the people who lost their lives on September 11th, while also having an individual connection to the piece. The artist allows us, the viewer, to be a part of the piece, while honoring every single person who lost their life that day. That's not traditionally beautiful. That's not what you would think of when I said, tell me what's the most beautiful piece of art that you've ever seen in your life. That's not what you would say. You wouldn't bring that up. There wasn't an immense amount of talent and specialized skills to create this piece. It's 2,983 paper squares, watercolored, a different shade of blue, with a quote in the middle. And that's it. But it's more than just the sum of its parts that make this piece of art so moving. And when it comes to photography, unless you are simply taking photos of documents for historical purposes that need to be accurate, or just taking photos of an item at the grocery store to send to your spouse and say, like, is this the right one? Is this what you're looking for? As long as that's not all that you're doing, if you're taking other photos, you too are creating art. And I think that can be hard to understand at first, because we just know in our brains that we see something that looks pretty. I'd like to capture that. And then we spend so long trying to just learn the tool that we can get lost forgetting the goal of the photo. But let me just create like a great photo technically. Let me make sure that I understand this tool. It's hard to move past that. It's hard to move to that next stage of, okay, you know what? Forget it. I know the tool. I don't need to learn any more about this tool. Let me just create something out of how I feel, or will help others feel something. I mean, when you take a photo of a beautiful sunset, why are you taking a photo of that? Because you feel something. And you're taking a photo because you want somebody else to feel how beautiful it is. Or you want to feel that feeling again later. When you take a photo of your child at the park, why are you taking that photo? You're taking that photo so that you can remember this fleeting moment, because time does not stop. And you can look back and feel that emotion, feel that nostalgia. That's why we take photos. And that is rooted in emotion. That is to help us feel emotions. And that is, we learn this tool to help others hopefully feel these emotions too. And that's art. That is art. If that's what you're doing, if you want somebody to feel something in a photo of yours, you're creating art. The power of art is in the ability to communicate and express those feelings or evoke those feelings, whether that's feelings of joy or whether that's feelings of loss or grief. Art can be a testament to resilience and hope. This is one of my favorite things about photography, is that the way that I use it is mainly just for capturing memories of my family, right? That's the majority of my images. It's photos while we're out together, photos of us doing things, taken with intention in more of an artistic way, a focus on lighting, on composition. But again, that's the tool. But as the art form, photography has this amazing ability to help us process life in various ways. But I want to talk specifically about processing grief, because that's something that we don't do much of. It's not spoken about a lot of, or often, rather. Photography can help us in several ways. Photography as a form of processing grief and loss. We can do that by simply capturing these memories. Photos there's something that can be tangible. We can hold on to that are reminders of these moments that we've experienced in our lives, of the people who we have had in our lives, of the places that we've gone in our life. And a photo is our way of preserving these memories that might otherwise fade in time. And that, to me, is what provides a lot of comfort. When I look at photos of my children as babies, man, you hear it all the time. You say, like, where did the time go? But here's proof. I stopped time in that moment to take a photo here. And here's proof of that child, of that person. And that is such a powerful tool, right? That allows us to remember these loved ones from the past, or these past experiences that we've had in our lives. Photography can also help us heal through sharing our work. Because when we share our images with others, that can lead to conversations, that can help us have these opportunities to talk about these memories or these individuals, share our feelings about maybe experiences that have been lost or just in the past. Having that photo of my dad, that selfie that he took, opened up the door for my mom and I to have a little conversation about that moment. And that helped me feel closer to him. Photography can help us process our grief and loss through simple artistic expression. Because creating a photo, to do that, you have to transform these raw emotions that we have within us, our feelings, into visual images. And that experience can be very cathartic. It can be very therapeutic, emotional. It can also make us feel pretty good because through different techniques in photography that we've learned, we can convey certain feelings into these images as well. Maybe you use negative space to create a feeling of emptiness. Maybe you use shadow to convey feelings of sorrow. Maybe you use motion or light to convey feelings of hope. Maybe you use color to convey emotions of anger. And it's in using these techniques to convey these emotions that we're able to make the intangible tangible. Photography can help us process grief and loss just through emotional release. As I said, taking photos can be therapeutic, but also taking photos can be therapeutic, meaning taking the camera out, using your eyes to see the scene, framing a shot, focusing on the details, capturing the emotion or the scene in the way that you're trying to convey acts as this emotional release because it helps you to externalize how you feel internally. It allows you to slow down. It allows you to see the world with more intention. Using photography to process grief and loss can also lead to community building. When we take our photos, and when you really shoot with intention, you're putting yourself into an image. A piece of you is inside that image, whether it's your feeling or your desires or just your preferences. We're putting ourselves in that image. And when we share that image with others, when we engage with others, and whether that just be family or our community or even photography groups, that can foster a sense of community. When we share our experiences and our works with others, it can help ourselves and it can help others realize that we're not alone and that oftentimes we can feel the same thing about different events, or we can feel different things about the same event. And that helps us feel more connected to each other, lets us know that we're not alone. And that is community building. So today I want to give you a personal photography assignment. I don't do these often. Can't remember the last time I did one, but I want to do more of these. I want to give you a personal photography assignment. We're going to call this a pass. Personal P assignment. Pass. Yeah, I don't know. I got to work on that. But the assignment that I want to give you is to introduce to you the idea of using personal photography to process your own emotions. So I have 2 assignments for you. You can choose either one, or you can do both. Bonus points if you do both. Assignment number 1, I'm calling Memory Lane. It's not the most exciting name, but it gets the job done. When I was visiting Los Angeles last year, we took the family and we walked around the same neighborhood, like downtown, like right in downtown heart of Hollywood, where I was living to go to film school. We visited the apartment that I lived in. And this sounds dumb because we were just like on the outside of the apartment. Obviously we didn't go inside, and we didn't like travel out of our way. Like it was off the main street. So it wasn't like a big deal. We didn't go to all the places that I had been to, but there was something about seeing that apartment that it did something to me. It felt nostalgic. I had this feeling of like hope again. Not that I had lost hope, but I guess it was just bringing up that feeling of hope that I had when I first moved in. I remembered the day that we moved in and how difficult it was to have a U-Haul on that one-way street, and cars were constantly honking to get us to move and stuff. And I thought, wow, this is going to be my life. Like this is pretty crazy. And I took some photos of the outside of the building. I took a photo of me in front of my balcony that I had in this apartment, and that reminded me of some shorts that we had shot inside the apartment and then on that balcony as well. So when you revisit these places from your past and you capture them now with the additional life experience that you have, with everything else that you've gone through, with these additional years of wisdom and insight that you have, it can help process change. It can help process growth. It can help you just feel nostalgic, right? And it's always fun to feel nostalgic. My wife loves to watch commercials from the 90s. Oh man, it's wild how you haven't seen a commercial in literally 30 plus years and you know every single word. You haven't thought about it in 30 years and you know exactly how to sing it. You remember the pitch. You remember where you were the first time. It's wild. But it can help us with those feelings. And that is truly amazing. So those images that I took of the apartment, like they're not made for you. They're not made for a wide audience. They're made for me. It's made for a small audience, myself, my roommates that I had. I sent them those photos as well. And it's kind of wild because now, once again, we're going back to not only this artistic expression in the way that it's framed or this emotional release, but I'm also healing through sharing because I was able to share these photos with my friends, which also helps, once again, build community. So I want to encourage you to find something or think about something in your life that played a larger role, maybe in the past than it does today. Maybe it's an old house that you lived in. Maybe it's the place where you lived when your first child was born. Maybe it's the car dealership where you got your first car. Maybe it's that lookout spot at the top of the hill where you first kissed a girl or something. I don't know. Try to find these places. Think of these places that hold significance in your memory and go back there and capture them today. Assignment number 2 is called Nature's Metaphors. I don't know why I came up with these names, but hey, look, it works. All right. So don't come after me with this. But the idea was that I was actually looking back through some of my old photos recently, and I had just taken some fall photos last fall, obviously. And I was like, man, these are beautiful. But some of the photos that I took were of leaves that were already decaying. Even though the fall colors were like at their height, these ones were already falling apart and almost premature, much earlier than a lot of the other leaves that were out there in this beautiful location. And as I was looking at that, it made me feel something inside that I was going through personally not long ago. And I was able to relate that image that I took in nature as a metaphor for my life and what was going on in that moment. And it wasn't in like a depressed way. It was almost more of a motivational way. Like, wow, look at this. Like, it made me feel as if there were new beginnings ahead. Like an old part of me was dying, and I'm okay with that because that means that something new is coming. And that's how I saw it. But for you, if you're going through something like that, maybe the springtime is better. Maybe it's when new flowers are coming up. Maybe it's a very cloudy day with a single part in the skies where the sun comes through. Maybe that's how you feel. Maybe it's just stormy skies. Maybe it's something else in nature. Maybe it's just the way that the stream flows. You feel like you're just going with it right now. And maybe this isn't a time of building in your life, but maybe right now is a time to slow down and just relax. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's chaos. Maybe you don't spend as much time on your lawn as I do, like a crazy person, and your lawn has a few weeds in it, and it kind of feels like chaos. Or maybe you don't even look at your lawn in the first place. And I don't know, it's that time of year. I was thinking about lawn renovation and putting in all the orders for soil and manure and compost and getting a core aerator and thinking about when I'm going to dethatch and get the lawn all thin and figuring out how much sand I need to buy. But none of that matters to you. But like that's, I guess, where the idea came up here. And so try to look at nature and try to bring what's happening in nature into your own life and see how you can relate it in a metaphor. So there are the two assignments. There's memory lane, where you get to visit places from your past, revisit places from your past, capture them now in the hopes of processing your emotions, feeling some growth and nostalgia. And assignment 2, nature's metaphor, where you go out and you observe elements in nature and capture the ones that relate to your life currently. And then when you do that, I want you to come into the Beginner Photography Podcast community and share your photos. And I want to talk about them because photography is also a way to build community. Like I said earlier, engaging with others can help others realize that they're not alone in how they feel. And it can help you understand that others also feel similar to how you do and that you're not alone. So come into the free Beginner Photography Podcast community. If you're not a part of it already, you can join by heading to beginnerphotopod.com/group. Again, beginnerphotopod.com/group to join. It's free. Come on in. We'd love to have you. So to wrap up this whole thing, I really want you to look at the world through more of an artistic lens, to look at the world as more than just utility or art, but that you can introduce utility into your art and you can introduce art into utility, and that in everything you do can be a form of art. But in the traditional sense of these images that we are creating, we can help others, we can help ourselves by being intentional with our images and conveying emotion. And no matter what that looks like to you, if you feel something in an image that you have created, that's art. It may not be art to me because maybe I don't feel the same way, or it doesn't even have to be the same way. Maybe I don't feel an emotional response when looking at a photo of your kids. No offense. I just think that my kids are the cutest in the world and all other kids just But if you feel an emotion when looking at photos of your kids, that's art. And that's valuable. And I want you to share it. Even if your kids aren't as cute as mine. I want you to share them in the Beginner Photography Podcast community so that we can talk about them. I want you to share what was going through your head, how this image helps you, what you were going for. That's it for today. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. Again, once you grab your photo, post it in the Beginner Photography Podcast community. And if you haven't joined already, you can head over to beginnerphotopod.com/group to join the community now. Until next week, remember, the more that you shoot today, the better of a photographer you will be tomorrow. Talk soon.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.